What happens when a man who clawed his way out of addiction, prison, and rock bottom walks onto one of America's most famous talk show stages, and the host decides to tear him apart piece by piece live on national television? No one in that studio expected what was about to unfold. No one saw the moment coming when the room went completely silent, when cameras froze on faces, when a man who had spent years learning to control his temper finally reached a breaking point that millions of viewers would never forget. This wasn't a scripted moment. This wasn't planned drama. This was a raw, unfiltered collision between two completely different ideas about what a human being deserves, and it happened in front of a live audience with nowhere to hide. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and drop a comment below telling me, do you believe people truly deserve second chances, or does the past always follow you? Because after what you're about to see, you're going to have very strong feelings. I'm your host, and this is Focus Insights. Let's get into it. It was a Tuesday morning, and the studio lights at The View were blazing with that familiar, warm, golden glow that millions of Americans wake up to every day. The audience was buzzing, not with the usual polite anticipation, but with genuine excitement. Because the man walking onto that stage wasn't just another celebrity promoting a record. He was someone whose story had touched people deeply, someone whose journey from darkness to redemption had made grown adults cry in their cars driving to work. Jelly Roll, born Jason Deford, settled into that iconic chair with the kind of ease that comes from someone who has done the hard work on himself. Broad shoulders, a quiet confidence, that familiar face covered with tattoos that tell the story of a life lived at the very edge. He was wearing a clean black button-down shirt. His hands were relaxed in his lap. His eyes were warm. This was a man who had spent years rebuilding himself, one honest conversation at a time, and today was just supposed to be another one of those conversations. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with her trademark warmth, introducing him with genuine affection. The audience welcomed him with real applause, not polite clapping, but the kind of response that says, "We already love you," before you've even spoken. "Thank you so much for having me," Jelly Roll said, that deep southern drawl filling the room like a familiar melody. "I've been watching this show for years. This is pretty surreal for me." And you could feel it, that feeling in a studio when everything is right, when the energy is good, when a conversation is about to go somewhere meaningful. Sarah Haynes jumped in first with questions about his new music, his collaborations, his upcoming tour, and Jelly Roll answered with the kind of humility that you simply cannot fake, talking about how music had saved his life, how his daughter had given him a reason to change, how he woke up every morning knowing he had to earn the life he was building. Then Alyssa Farah Griffin asked him about his criminal justice reform work, and something shifted in him. His eyes lit up, his posture leaned forward, his voice gained that quality it gets when he's talking about something that means everything to him. "I've been where these guys are," he said, leaning slightly toward the hosts. "I know what it feels like to think society has already written you off, like you're never going to be more than your worst mistake. But that's not true. People can change. They just need someone to believe in them and give them a real shot." The audience was completely with him. The other hosts were nodding. It felt like one of those rare moments on live television where something genuine and important was being said. And then Joy Behar shifted in her seat. If you've watched The View enough times, you know that look. Joy has a way of sitting quietly during a conversation, almost too quietly, until she decides it's time. And when she does, there's a barely there smirk, a slight tilt of the head, the look of someone who has already decided what she thinks and is now just waiting for her moment to say it. She had that look. "Well," she said, her voice carrying that signature blend of confidence and condescension, "that's all very nice and inspirational, but let's be real here." The studio didn't go silent yet, but the energy shifted, like the temperature in a room dropping a degree or two without anyone quite being able to explain why. "You spent years breaking the law. You were involved with drugs. You were in and out of prison. Now you're sitting here talking about second chances like you're some kind of expert on rehabilitation?" For just a fraction of a second, you could see something move across Jelly Roll's face. Not anger, not yet. Something more like careful recognition. The recognition of a man who has heard this kind of challenge before and has learned to respond to it with patience. "I think my experience gives me a unique perspective," he replied, his voice measured and calm. "I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything except my own journey. But if sharing my story can help even one person avoid the mistakes I made, then it's worth it." A few audience members murmured in approval. The other host smiled slightly, clearly relieved that the moment had passed without incident. But Joy wasn't done, not even close. She leaned back in her chair, that practiced, self-satisfied lean that viewers know all too well, and delivered her second strike. "But don't you think it's a little convenient? Now that you're famous, now that you're making money, suddenly you're this reformed character? How do we know this isn't just good PR?" The words landed like a flat stone dropped into still water, and the ripples started immediately. Jelly Roll's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been relaxed, open, easy, curled slightly in his lap before he consciously released them. The other hosts exchanged the briefest of glances, the kind that says, "Here we go." "Joy," he said, and there was a quiet weight to just that one word. "I think you're misunderstanding what this is about. This isn't PR. This is my life. These aren't talking points. These are real experiences that shaped who I am." Sarah Haynes tried to redirect, asking about a specific program Jelly Roll had been supporting, and for a moment it looked like the conversation might find its footing again. Jelly Roll answered graciously, genuinely, describing the real, concrete work being done to help former inmates rebuild their lives. But Joy wasn't interested in rebuilding. She was interested in pressure. "I'm just saying," she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone, the one that dresses cruelty as intellectual curiosity. "It's easy to talk about redemption and second chances when you're sitting pretty with a record deal and sold-out concerts. What about the people you hurt along the way? What about the communities that were damaged by the drug trade you were part of?" Now the studio felt different. The warmth that had filled the room just minutes earlier had drained out of it completely. Jelly Roll's breathing changed. You could see it if you watched carefully. His chest was no longer moving with the easy rhythm of a man in a comfortable conversation. His shoulders had squared, his body had shifted forward, almost imperceptibly, like a man planting his feet.
"You want to talk about the people I hurt?" he said, and his voice had found a new register, louder, raw, unmistakably real. "Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how I've spent every single day since I got clean trying to make amends, trying to do better, trying to use whatever platform I have to help people." Whoopi put a gentle hand on the desk, that instinctive experience gesture she uses when she can feel a segment about to leave the rails. But Joy pressed on. "That doesn't undo the damage, does it?" she said, her voice smooth and unbothered. "That doesn't bring back the lives that were lost to overdoses, the families that were destroyed. You can't just sing your way out of that responsibility." There was a sharp intake of breath somewhere in the audience. Alyssa Farah Griffin shifted in her chair. Sarah Haynes looked down at her notes. Whoopi's expression had moved from warm concern to something more serious. And Jelly Roll, the man who had spent years in therapy, in prayer, in hard conversations with himself and with God, was sitting completely still. "I can't bring those people back," he said, quietly. The quietness was somehow more alarming than shouting would have been. "I know that. I live with that every single day. I've stood at funerals of people I grew up with who didn't make it out. I have nightmares about kids who overdosed on things I was part of selling. You think I don't carry that?" He paused. The silence was absolute. "You think because I wrote some songs and people like them, I somehow forgot what I came from, what I caused?" Joy opened her mouth. Jelly Roll's voice cut through before she could form a word. "No, I'm going to finish, because you started this conversation and I'm going to finish it properly." Whoopi nodded slightly, giving him the floor. "I work with organizations that help addicts get clean. I visit prisons. I talk to kids who are making the exact same mistakes I made at their age. I donate money, real money, to families who lost people to overdoses. I'm not doing press releases about it. I'm doing it. And you're sitting here asking me what I've done?" His voice was rising again now, and the escalation was visible in the way the audience was leaning forward, the camera operators quietly shifting angles, the producers in the control room almost certainly watching numbers they'd never seen before. "Let me ask you something," he said, turning to face Joy directly. "What exactly are you doing to make the world better, besides sitting here tearing people down on live television?" Joy's chin lifted slightly. "I'm a journalist asking legitimate questions about accountability." "Accountability?" Jelly Roll's laugh was brief and cold. "You think you're holding me accountable? I hold myself accountable every single day. I don't need you for that." Sarah Haynes, "I think what Joy is asking, and we all want to understand this, is how the people who were affected by your past feel about your current platform." "And I think that's a fair question," Jelly Roll said, pivoting towards Sarah with something like relief, like a man grateful for solid ground. I've had those conversations with real people in real rooms, not on television, and those conversations are the ones that matter to me more than anything." He turned back to Joy, but that's not what she's asking. She's not asking me about healing. She's asking me whether I deserve to exist in public life at all. Joy, that's a massive overstatement. Is it? His voice dropped back down, low and deliberate, because from where I'm sitting, the message has been pretty clear. You've already decided I'm a fraud. Everything I say from this chair is being filtered through that assumption. So what exactly is the point of this conversation for you? What outcome are you looking for? Joy started to respond, but Jelly Roll was already leaning forward, elbows on the table, and when he did, the full presence of the man, the size, the stillness, the absolute refusal to be diminished, filled the frame completely. Say what you actually mean. Stop hiding behind "I'm just asking questions." Say what you actually think.
And Joy said it. "What I actually think," she said, straightening in her chair, her voice steady with the confidence of someone who believes she is about to land a finishing blow, "is that underneath all that redemption talk, you're still the same angry criminal, just with better clothes." The studio went silent. Not television pause silent, not the silence of a commercial break loading, the absolute, airless, physical silence of a room full of human beings who have just witnessed something they cannot unhear. For a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, nobody moved. The camera caught Whoopi's face, pure shock, mouth slightly open. The camera caught Alyssa, one hand pressed flat against the desk like she was steadying herself. The camera caught the audience, hundreds of faces frozen in the kind of collective disbelief that only happens when something genuinely unexpected cuts through the noise of normal life. And the camera caught Jelly Roll. He didn't explode. He didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He just looked at her. And in that look was everything. The years in county jail, the funerals he'd attended, the nightmares, the gratitude, the grief, the work, the love for his daughter, the absolute mountain of effort it takes every single day to be a better version of a person who has done terrible things. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a conversational volume, but it carried across that studio like a bell. "What I really am," he said slowly, "is a father who wants his daughter to be proud of him. What I really am is someone who knows what rock bottom looks like and climbs out of it every single day. What I really am is a human being who made terrible choices and is spending the rest of his life trying to make up for them." He paused. "But what you are, Joy, is someone who gets paid to tear people down on television. Someone who thinks being mean is the same thing as being smart. Someone who has never had to fight for anything real in your entire life." Another pause, heavier this time. "So you don't understand what real change looks like because you've never needed it." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but something in the room had shifted, irrevocably, completely, and she seemed to sense it. The words came out quieter than before. "I stand by everything I've said. People have a right to be skeptical." Jelly Roll stood up. It wasn't a dramatic lurch. It was measured, deliberate, the movement of a man who has decided this conversation has reached its natural end. He reached down and unclipped his microphone with the careful, unhurried precision of someone who has made a final decision and is at peace with it. He turned to Whoopi. "Thank you for having me on the show," he said, with what sounded like genuine warmth and equally genuine exhaustion. "I'm sorry it turned into this, but I won't apologize for defending myself against someone who came at me with nothing but malice and prejudice." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He looked back at Joy one final time, not with rage, not with contempt, but with something that might have been the most devastating emotion of all: pity. "You had a chance to be part of something positive today. You could have asked me about the kids I mentor, the families I try to help, the real work. Instead, you chose to be cruel. That's on you." He walked off the set. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then the audience started clapping. Not everyone at first, a few hands uncertain as if asking permission, then more, then the kind of sustained rolling wave of applause that producers dream about and cannot manufacture. Whoopi exhaled slowly, gathered herself, and looked directly into camera one with the expression of a woman who has seen everything and is still occasionally surprised. Joy sat alone at the end of the desk, looking for the first time in the entire segment,
small. Take a breath, because what we just watched wasn't really about a music interview going wrong on daytime television. It was about something much older and much larger than that. It was about whether or not we, as a society, as a culture, as human beings sitting in studios and living rooms and comment sections, actually believe that people can change. Not in theory, not as a nice idea to post about, but in practice, when someone who has caused real harm is standing right in front of you asking for the chance to prove they're different. Joy Behar represents a real and legitimate impulse. Skepticism, the refusal to be fooled, the instinct that redemption narratives can be performed as easily as they can be earned. That impulse has value. It protects people from being manipulated. It asks the hard questions that accountability demands. But there's a line between skepticism and cynicism, between asking hard questions and deciding the answers before you've heard them, between holding someone accountable and simply denying that accountability is even possible. Jelly Roll in that moment wasn't just defending himself. He was defending every person who has ever sat across from someone like Joy, someone with a microphone and a platform and a predetermined verdict, and tried to say, I know what I did. I'm not running from it. I'm just asking you to see who I'm becoming. This wasn't just about a country star and a talk show host. This was about whether second chances are real and what it costs a person to believe they deserve one. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments below. Was Jelly Roll right to fire back the way he did? Or did Joy Behar have a fair point that fame and a record deal shouldn't automatically qualify someone as a spokesperson for redemption? Drop your honest take below. No right answer. This is exactly the kind of conversation that matters. If this video hit you the way I think it did, subscribe to Focus Insights right now. We go deep on the moments that reveal who people really are when the pressure is on. And if you want more confrontations that change the room forever, stay right here, because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind.